Hello, welcome to Focus on Fantasy Romance, episode number 39, a podcast where we discuss books, genre, industry, and our geeky lives. I'm your host, Elle Klaus.
And I'm AR Clerk.
And it is just us today. And we don't have a topic per se, but because it's a mixer, we're going to start with personal updates. So writing-wise, I'm kind of in limbo. I finished my story for the anthology, the Love Through Heartache anthology. So my story is off to the editor. I think everybody except Paulina might still be working on hers, is to the editor. I think that comes out in September? Yeah, that comes out in September. Deceiving the Bandit Lord is still in betas. I'm waiting for Isabel actually to get the beta back to me, and then I will do another pass and send that to my editor. And then I do need to do some plotting on Winter's Bride, because my writers group has they call it a Roar into writing competition, where you have to write a novella or a novel before the end of November. So it's kind of like you can wait until the last minute and do it during NaNoWriMo. But you have to buy in, and so I have bought in to get the rough draft, at least, of Winter's Bride done by the end of November. So I should probably plot some of that.
Is that a novel or a novella?
Yeah, I'm not really sure right now.
Just however.
It's a retelling. Yeah, it's a retelling of I think it's West of the Sun, East of the Moon, or East of the Moon, West of the Sun. I always get those flip-flopped. But it's a retelling of a fairy tale, and it will be however long it needs to be. I'd like it to be a novel, because I also want to try to do Kindle Scout with it, and you have to do novel length for Kindle Scout. But I've already got the book cover, because I found that pre-made that was just awesome. So that's the short term. Also, I did non-writing related. I did a 5K walk. I did the color run in Grand Rapids. The theme this year was unicorn. And no, I did not get my unicorn horn from there. If you're watching the video, I actually have a unicorn horn on because I want to. But you do win a medal for completing the course. This was actually my motivation for doing it, to get this medal. I wanted to run it, but my running buddy said, I can't run anymore because my knees are bad. Can we walk it? I'm like, yeah, it's easy peasy. So I did that. And I want to say thank you to Electra Gatus. She's an author friend of mine, writes sci-fi romance. She got me rainbow soap. I'm just all sorts of sparkle unicorn fancy today. So, Amy, what are your writing and personal updates?
Personally, it's been a hell of a week at the day job. So, very tough. Came home every night and pretty much just went to bed. Just one of those weeks. We all have them. But currently I am working on the third and final novel in the Mythical Madness series, which is fantasy romance, about three brothers who are the adopted sons of the Fates. And so the last book is on its way, and it's called Shadowbound. And so I'm about 15 or 20,000 words into that. Plugging along. I have some plans to, recently all my books came down and were reformatted, so they look nice and pretty on the inside to match the outsides. So that happened. Put a new cover on between, if y'all have read the original. The cover was pretty, but it wasn't very targeted to the audience. So the new cover Isabel made for me, and it's beautiful. So good job, Ish. And so that is out now, reformatted and put back up for sale, and that'll actually be free if Amazon has all their stuff together. That book will actually be free tomorrow and Sunday. So everybody get a copy if you can. Let's see, what else? Planning, I have a lot of things planned. I have some if you're have been a reader of mine, you know, I have some series that are kind of hanging out in limbo. So the Steampunk, which is The Alchemist's Kiss and Enchanter's Embrace, will have 1 and possibly 2 more novels that go along with them to wrap up the stories of the characters that you met in the first and second book. Kind of give an overall story arc to what's happening with the magical, non-magical war that was going on, or in the process of going on in the first 2 books. Mythical Madness will be completed, and I will complete Between, which is part of a series, but they will not be novels. They will actually be novellas for the last 3 stories. And my plan is to put all 3 novellas together and actually like release them together in a novel. So it'll be Keyholder Book 1 and Keyholder Book 2 for that. So then that would wrap up the Angels. And everyone keeps begging me for a sequel to Bound to You. I've promised that I will do it. I have 10,000 words already started. It's going to be really, really, really awesome if I ever get there. It's SFR, which is one of my favorites to write, but that's unfortunately down the road a little bit. So I have lots of stuff to work on. I am going to continue my Decopunk mystery serial in my newsletter, which is Death and Decoupage. So that is a Franny Calico mystery. If anybody's getting my newsletter, then you're getting the Franny Calico updates. So I am continuing that. And just going to be lots of adventure and lots of romance. Just going to plug right along, try to finish everything up. And by the time mid-2018 rolls around, I guess, I'll be ready to kind of start some new adventures, because everything that I have currently hanging will be wrapped up by then, if I have my way. Anybody who likes Aeon Project from Takamo Universe, unfortunately, Takamo has their production on hold right now. I am not starting book 3 until I get edits back for book 2, because I need continuity edits to make sure that my timelines are correct. I've already screwed up my timeline once in that book, and I cannot afford to erase 25,000 words if I screw up again. So unfortunately, I cannot finish Aeon Project until each previous book is edited before I can start the new one. They have a massive universe with a lot of continuity and a lot of canon and game canon that I have to stick to. So anybody who's waiting for more Aeon Project, it is coming. I'm just waiting for the go-ahead from Takamo. So I just wanted to put that out there in case anybody thinks I'm being lazy and not doing them. No, the cyborgs are coming, but I have to make sure that it all makes sense and it all works within the game canon. So still holding on to that.
Yeah, I'm having the
That's
same problem. I tried to write book 3 in my Wilderlands Chronicles, which is Haunting the Noble Hunter, and I couldn't do it because book 2, Deceiving the Bandlord, wasn't done. Like, I had written it, but I haven't finalized it, so I haven't gotten through the final edits, and I'm like, I can't really push forward with book 3 until I know exactly what happens with book 2.
Right.
So,
and that's the thing,
yeah,
too.
totally
In book
understand.
2, I had already made a mistake that I had kind of mixed up the timelines in the Takamo, and I had written in some characters who, frankly, hadn't met each other at the point that book 2, Dark Star, is taking place. I also want to make sure that I have all my plot holes filled in. If I have anything major hanging out there, I need the editor, who's fabulous. Her name is Kaz, to really help me just get everything kind of spit shined before I start book 3, because I need to make sure that I keep everything linear, because book 3 is taking place while book 2 is taking place. It's on a different planet with a different group of people. So I have to make sure that my timelines are in sync with each other. And it would be easy. I know everybody says, oh, you could write a book do a series Bible. That would be fabulous, except that we're talking about Takamo has its own Wikipedia page. It's like that big, and it has so many dates and timelines and historical references and character references that I really need the continuity edits and all of the content edits to be complete before I can start book 3, because otherwise I might get confused and mess something up and then waste a lot of time that I don't really have. So I'd rather just do it right the first time.
Yeah, I don't blame you there. I need to do series Bible for my Wilderlands because I didn't know what I was doing when I first started, so I didn't keep track of all the details. And now that I'm getting further into the series, I'm like, huh.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to go back and reread my book 15 times just to get the details right. So I should start a series Bible.
I kind of did that with Mythical Madness. It's been so long between book 2, which is Providence, and book 3, which is Shadowbound, because I worked on several projects in between. I sort of forgot the little details. Like, of course, I know my characters' names and I know what they look like, and I know the major overarching plot stories of each novel. But I forgot some of the small details, like what's the name of this town and what's the name of this, berry, and what's the name of this road. So I was doing a lot of like Kindle open on my phone, flipping through the pages, to make sure that I had everything named correctly. And I didn't forget a C when I spelled Sasha because so yeah, I kind of messed up not at least jotting down notes for myself, but I realistically thought I would have done book 1, 2, and 3 like bam, bam, bam in a row and not jump around, but yeah.
Right. Having my paperback for Stealing the Wolf Prince has actually been very helpful because I can bookmark things. And I don't know, when it comes to reference books, I have to have them in paper. I can't do digital reference books. I don't know why. I must be old. But yeah, I have to have paper. And you said that you were working on novels that take place at the same time. So I totally did that with my steampunk series, which I call the Chaos Factor, but the first 2 stories in that series are actually the same story, but they're told from someone else, the different point of view. So the first one is the female's point of view, which is Calliope, or Calliope. And then the second one is Axel's point of view. So I had to make sure they said everything the same, like it's someone else's perception of what's going on, but they definitely did say the same thing. So I had to go through side by side. That says he says this here. Yep, he says it here. I had it through almost to the print version, and I gave it to someone who does really good not copy edits, proofreading, I guess. She looks for errors. She's just like, hey, you've got this. He says this first and then this, and then you flipped it over here. I'm like, dang it. Never going to do that again. Never going to do that again. That was just, like I got the idea from Stephanie Meyer. She was going to do book 1 of her Twilight series, and do it again from Edward's point of view. I'm like, oh, no, I'm not going to do an entire novel that way because I don't hate myself. So, but I do want to flip over to the Wilderlands. So book 2, well, book 1 is Kira and Lachlan's story. It takes place in fall. And then we've got book 3, which is Brogan and Aisling's story. That takes place in winter. But I also want to do a novella that's kind of Lachlan and Kira's first winter together. Like they're newly in love. They're still kind of discovering each other. So I'm like, that could be a really cute novella idea. And then like there's side characters that developed in Deceiving the Bandit Lord, which you don't know, but Phelan has his little romantic interest. Phelan's in book 1. But that's not a novel, that's a novella. Plus it doesn't add to the overall arching mystery of what happened to all the magic users that is in the Wildlands. So like I'm going to have kind of that parallel, but at least mine are going to be completely separated.
No, mommy's busy. Mommy's working. Leave mommy alone.
So it's going to be
Leave mommy alone and go to bed.
Lachlan and Kira's isolated winter that doesn't have any connection with Broken and Aisling's also isolated winter. Like I think they might reference each other, but yeah, that's one of the things on the things I want to write soonish list.
Yeah, for Dark Star and Decaying Orbit, which are book 2 and book 3 of Aeon Project. So Dark Star is primary 1, so he's the dad figure. cyborg, and Yuri, who was his wife. I tend to, if I have a lot of characters together in one story, then it becomes very difficult to focus on who are the two main characters and not try to go off on tangents and talk about all my side characters that I love. And I want them to have their own stories and their own lives. So I decided specifically for Aeon Project, I was going to break the couples off separately from one another, from the group, always. So if you read An Enduring Sun, which is Ren and Sharon, they actually meet, then they get with this family, and then, you know, their story is, the family's there, but they're kind of vague characters. And then Primary One and Yuri, he goes off in search of her, where she's in cryostasis, while the boys go to try to save Vex's life. So all the way through Darkstar toward the end, you don't know what's going on with the boys. It's all One and Yuri's story of how they're trying to escape this, you know, desolate, quarantined space station. And then they're about maybe the last two chapters in or something like that, is a chapter about what are the boys doing at this point. And so then you find out that, you know, Vex, who is the main character of Decaying Orbit, meets his Gus, his love interest. And so then they get split off from the rest of the group. So at the end of Dark Star, the rest of the group returns to find One and Yuri, while Vex and his love interest are stuck together on this planet. So then it rolls directly into Decaying Orbit, which is what are Vex and Gus doing at the same time that the guys and One and Yuri are trying to come and rescue him. So I tried to interweave the timelines just enough to where it's a seamless transition into what are these two characters doing, and then their evolution of their relationship and all these things that happen in their adventure. Of course, they've got to have an adventure. And there's bombs and knives and blowing up and all that kind of fun stuff. But then as I kind of had this really like awesome idea about the overreaching plot line, and if you know anything about Takamo Universe, it's all about AI, and it's about the understanding of like what it is to be alive and what it is to be human and all of those things you talk about when you talk about AI and cyborgs and all that. But like the overreaching plot line to the very end is I've got like 2 more books to go before I get to the very end. So I have to make sure that I stretch out and add enough clues into each novel to where when I get to the final story, which is Q's story, that I can wrap it all up in a nice, neat bow. And it's all got enough clues and enough plot and enough, throughout each novel to kind of drive the main story to the end. So I was trying to like kind of run a parallel, but I would kind of deviate off and let them have their story and then come back together and then split off and come back together and split off. It's more of I think it's a way, a technique that people who write military sci-fi, I think it's a way to like humanize like a war or humanize like a mission, so that you're not caught up in like it's an army. You're caught up in like it's a man, it's a woman, it's a, you know what I mean? So that's what I was trying to do, so it didn't get so complicated, I guess.
Right. So you focus on the individual so that people can relate versus this is
right. And like I made the mistake, if you read between, you'll see the mistake. I have all these characters and they're all really super interesting and they all have like these really complicated, difficult backgrounds, and they're all talking at once in a group, and that's very difficult to follow without a dialogue tag and without an extremely like well-written specific voice for every character, which I was a newbie when I wrote Between. That was the first book I ever published. So like my characters, a lot of them, I know who they are and I know what they sound like in my head, but I think for readers, when they're having those conversations and there's 6 people in the room and it's going back and forth, I think that it's really complicated for readers to kind of follow like who said what, who said this, who said that. So I was trying to get away from that a little bit so that I could really like drill down to the two main characters and make it, you know, specific. Is that what you did with like Stealing the Wolf Prince and the following books? Like, you're going to drill, you really wanted to like drill down into like these specific people and their motivations and their.
Right. And I did it subconsciously. Like, I'm actually a treasurer of my local writers group, and we have professional speakers come in, and there's one that comes at least once a year named Alex Corvo. And every time she does a presentation, I have a massive aha moment. And so she was talking about the final showdown that your hero has with the villain. And it always has to be your hero and the villain. It can't be your hero and his posse against the villain. It's always like a one-on-one. And I realized I had done that towards the end of book 2, so Deceiving the Bandit Lord. Arter has a very large, he's a side character, so he is, Phelan's in the book, but he is Brogan. Arter is more of a BFF with Brogan than Phelan is in this book, if that makes any sense. So in book 1, Brogan and Phelan, bromance. But in book 2, Arter has to train Brogan how to do magic, so they're closer during the events of the novel than Phelan. Phelan is there, but he gets sent on a mission, and anyway, so Arter is there, the big bad guy is there, Aisling's there, Brogan's there, and Arter's there, and subconsciously I didn't even know that I was supposed to do this to make the showdown more tense for the reader, but I knocked Arter off, and I remember, like, knocked him out, and I remember commenting that I hadn't had anyone pass out in the novel yet, and then like I finished editing that section, I'm like, I lied, I knocked out the elf. Because I used it as a device in the book 1. Kira goes unconscious quite a bit, and I actually made a joke about it towards the end. So I knocked him out because subconsciously I knew that it had to be Brogan and the bad guy, or Aisling and the bad guy. It couldn't be their entire posse against one guy. So yeah, like, I think subconsciously I knew that you need to whittle it down to just the bare essential characters, so that as a writer you don't get lost, as a reader they don't get lost, and it just makes it more dynamic. So yeah, that, but I didn't know that, you know?
Yes, I do know. And that's something funny. So I want to show you guys this. So I got this. This is my beautiful paperback of Redshift. It's so pretty. The back, so pretty. And see how thick it is? So pretty. So the thing about this book is, I'll tell you all something so hilarious, and I'm not going to spoil it for you, but there's no villain in this book at all. So I didn't realize it until the book was over and published, and I actually got my print copy. And I'm reading through it, and I had one of those aha moments where I'm reading through it, and I get down to like, and if you've ever seen this book or read it, it's divided into parts, and then each part has chapters. So I'm in part 2, chapter 3, which is towards the back of the book, and I'm going through here and put the book down, and I sat here and I thought a minute, and I thought, there's not really a bad guy in this whole book. Like, it's basically Mother Nature is trying to like F the whole world. Like, how do you fight against Mother Nature? Well, so I thought, I wonder if readers are going to hate that, or if they're even going to notice that there's no bad guy, because I didn't notice there was no like defined bad guy. There are people that you think might be bad guys, or that the characters are distrust at first, but there's no really like defined villain. And so I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how readers are going to feel about that, because I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, I like it because I like the story, but yeah, well, there's no bad guy.
A setting can be a bad guy.
Yeah,
Mother Nature can be a bad guy.
Mother Nature, like, if you've ever had like the worst day of your life where like nothing could possibly go right no matter what you do, that's kind of like what happens in this book. So the entire future got effed, basically. Like, all the bad things that could possibly go wrong, they all went wrong at the same time. So my characters end up there like at the best possible time, sarcastically enough. So yeah, I got to thinking about it, and I thought, well, I think the universe is actually the bad guy in this book. Like, it is out to really just like pound them really hard, and it really does.
Yep.
And so yeah, so I created an unknowing, like unwitting bad guy. They fight against him. I can't really tell you what happens, but they do fight against the bad guy. But yeah, it turned out so pretty. I like it. That's my pride and joy for right now until I get a new one.
Until you finish your next book.
Until I finish my next book. Well, I'm gonna have I'd like to have my complete series, to put on my bookshelf. That'd be nice.
Yep. That's my goal, to see books in succession 1, 2, 3 and on, because I'm toying with a 4th book. Like, Wilderlands was originally meant to be just 3 books, but I'm like, it doesn't really wrap anything up. It's not like the whole overall arc of the series doesn't really get wrapped up. So I'm like, what? I need book 4. And I released a flash fiction, which was about how Lachlan and Kira first met as children. And if you read that, you know that there was a 4th child between the king and the queen. So Lachlan has a sister he doesn't know about yet, which will probably get revealed in the novella, the winter novella I want to write.
Yeah, that has to be an interesting story of how a royal child just isn't around anymore or suddenly goes missing.
Right.
Do you want to build a snowman type deal? Let's lock you away so nobody can see your terrible powers and you can't freeze your sister to death. But
well, that you read the book, right? The I think it's a cardinal or whoever was responsible for influencing Aiden.
Mm-hmm.
He had a hand in it, in the disappearance of the princess. So I want to get to that. So I'm thinking her whereabouts will be book 4.
Well, I was working on Shadowbound, and I like to add a literary character, a famous literary character, to each Mythical Madness story. So if you've read Desolation, there are several. If you've read Providence, you know that the Count of Monte Cristo is an important character, as well as Cthulhu and Odin and several other people. And the Cthulhu mythos is owed to my husband. So I was thinking about in Shadowbound, and I'm like, well, who do I want to add? And so at first I thought the Mad Hatter, because I really love Alice in Wonderland, but I thought that's kind of cliche because everybody likes Hatter. So I was really thinking about it, and then I thought about Sherlock Holmes. I did some research, and he's public domain, anything before 1923. And so then I was like, it just dawned on me that when I was a kid, I really enjoyed Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. And I always had wondered what happened to Tom Sawyer when he was an old man. So you will meet Tom Sawyer as an old man in Shadowbound. And so that is very interesting when you're working with characters who already have like a persona that they have to kind of stick to or whatever. But I was asking in our chat group, like, name some hermits. I'm like, name some literary hermits. Well, people start spitting out like J.D. Salinger and Thoreau, Henry David Thoreau. And I'm like, no, I mean fictional hermits, not real literary hermits. I'm like Boo Radley, and then, so yeah, it's always interesting when how our minds work when we're creating our stories and the things that each of us like, the little things that each of us like to add in there. Because I mean, like, Isabel likes guts. Like, she was talking about how when she writes, she likes guts and gore, and I always like to have like either a literary character or a reference to, when I always have action or an adventure of some sort in there. And usually magic or science that people think is magic tends to make an appearance, like a theme in what I write too. So it's always funny how I look back on it and I don't even mean to do those things, but they just kind of trickle their way in there when I'm not paying attention.
Yeah, so I guess mine would be extended family and everyone has like meets their match. So
well, you like bromances too. I mean, I like bromances too because like Icarus and Archimedes are like, you know, but yeah, you like the bromance and the humor. You like snark.
oh yeah, my characters
Your
are
characters
snarky.
like to be snarky.
Like, right. I don't think I'll ever be able to write a character that is not somehow sarcastic. Ever. So chaos factor. So the book one, like the two short stories are Calliope James and Axel Black. And then the next one, which is book 3, is a novella, Tamsin and Slade. Book 4 is going to be Infatuated. It's going to be Lear and Celine. But Edge, Slade's twin brother, has a romantic interest, and you don't know who she is, but she is in book 1. No, she's in book 3. I'm sorry, she's in Besotted. And one person is like, it's so and so, isn't it? I'm like, so I like hinting at secret relationships and referencing other source material. So I even did it in Cost of a Kiss, which is my short story for the anthology. If you read that story, it's going to reference Stealing the Wolf Prince. Starcrossed too.
So you have a Stephen King complex, which is you like to tie everything together into your main magnum opus.
Apparently,
everything goes down to the same universe.
In my defense, the 2 short stories take place in the same town that Stealing the Wolf Prince started in.
Well, then it makes sense that you might hear, a whisper or two.
Right. And, I've got some pretty powerful characters. So Starcrossed, the male lead in that story, is a renowned wizard of sorts who's known for just being nasty, like blowing shit up and just mass chaos. If he gets going, it's like a boulder going down a hill. You can't get him to stop because he's that powerful and that out of control. So that's bound to, be the talk of the town in other districts where it's not a direct influence. So yeah, there may be a reference in Cost of a Kiss about the king, the Wolf King in the north. Who's that?
And see, that's where we differ, because you don't have the bad habit that I do, which is author ADD. So, like, I can't.
Yes, I do.
No, but like you like to focus in your world that you built, and you like to expand upon your world. And I'm like, I'll get back to that world eventually. I want to go make something new. So, like, when we started the Love Through Heartache anthology, I must have started that story like 6 times, because every time I started it, I'm like, I want to keep it to this word count, because, I got to pay for editing. So I'm like, I got to be, thrifty. So I'm like, I want to keep it to this word count. Well, everything I started, it was like, well, that's too complicated. That's going to take forever to, I can't get that done in 10,000 words. So I was like, really? And then, so when I got to the final story, which is called, I don't know what it's called yet. I haven't really decided. It's called either the Eye of Rana, which is the god, or it's called Under an Atlantean Sky. I'm not sure which, but it's called something like that. Anyway, it is like completely the opposite of everything that I was writing. Because originally I was writing like wizard and Valkyrie story, like nice guy wizard meets badass Valkyrie. And it turned out absolutely nothing like that. It is really sweet Atlantean couple. They kind of drift apart because they're... Sorry, my dog was barking. Yeah, my dog was barking, sorry. So they kind of drift apart because, their careers and everything. And... sorry about that, guys. She adores my husband, so he just walked by. But they kind of drift apart, and then they kind of find themselves again. They decide they want to have a child. Having a child is very difficult, and it ended up being nothing. It's not an adventure at all, which is a complete departure for me. And I'm like, where the heck did this story come from? So, I kind of find myself like drifting from not even subgenre to subgenre, which you've seen my books, you know I do. But even from like style to style. So yeah, I have to sometimes like force myself to get back on the track that I'm supposed to be on. You know, it's like Mythical Madness. I pretty much had to go back and scan Desolation and Providence to make sure I'm writing in the same style with the same type of voice for the third book that I did for book 1 and 2, because it's a completely different type of book than Alchemist's Kiss or Enchanter's Embrace. So it's like I make it harder for myself by always wanting to experiment and do things differently. Whereas it would be easier if I wrote inside one universe that I could always, you know, expand on and make bigger and add details to.
I see your point, because I have a list of all the series and books that I want to write, and at least 4 of the 5 up there are set in the same setting as the Wildland Chronicles. It might not be in the same area, but so the magic rules would be the same, and I would just have to develop the history of the area that I decide to set it in. Chaos Factor is steampunk, so it is alternate history set in London. But I've got 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 possible novellas in there. I think I want to keep those all novella length. But yeah, all the same setting. And there's only one that I would actually have to do extensive world building for, which is my TikTok Heart vampire steampunk idea, which is like, I'm not going to be able to get to it for a while, but it's the idea that vampires are real, they're feral, and unless you can implant a mechanical heart into them, they're not sentient. They're just like wild creatures that kill. So there's a lot more to it. They're actually a government run program, and they're called tickers if they have the mechanical heart. I'm totally not explaining it right, so it sounds awesome, but it's awesome. It's going to be awesome. But yeah, it's going to be a romance too. So like there's the ticker and his handler, and my ticker's name is Sterling, and he is in love with his handler's daughter, whose name is December. Yeah, it's going to be awesome when I get around to writing it.
That's kind of how I feel about, well, thanks to you guys. I mean, like, you kind of put me back on track, because I was ready to jump into the 19th Soul Sherpa, like, immediately when the idea first came to me, because it was, like, so, the world was very well developed, like, already in my head, because, like, it starts out with Pol, and Pol is a Sherpa who lives in the Himalayas in a village, and he guides souls from this life to the next, and that's what a soul Sherpa does. But so we went to our local writers meeting, and they're like, "Oh, just write for 15 minutes about whatever you want." So here I am, and I'm like, I saw this sign that said the 19th Soul Sherpa on it outside my local grocery store, and I'm like, oh, that's just an awesome title for a book. So I was like, I'm gonna write about that at writers meeting. So it's turned out like I was already like churning out, like, you know, in 15 minutes I got like 1,500 words. And you know, I came to the chat group with you guys, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to be so great. I can't wait to start it. And you guys are like, whoa, 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 whoa. You have this and this and this and this. You've got to finish first before you get to start that. And I'm like, oh man, that's not fair. I want to write now. I want to write it right now. Because that's just how my brain works. Like, I want what, you know, is the freshest idea first. And I've always written that way, but now that I have several series started, I suppose it does make more sense to finish those before I start something new.
Yeah, now that you have accountability partners.
I do. But it's still there, and I have it all written down, and I have it saved, and, you know, the ideas are still very vivid, and the stories are still very vivid. And we were talking about narrowing our focus, you know, and that's a very difficult thing for me to do, because I like to write what I want to write, and I don't like to narrow my focus, because that's no fun. But you know, somebody who reads Desolation may not be the same kind of person who wants to read The Alchemist's Kiss, and I understand that, and it's hard to build a readership as an author that way. You know, you just have a few people in each subgenre that like what you write or whatever. But
I don't know. I think a well-written story is a well-written story.
Yeah, I'm hoping. I mean, you know, I kind of can't force myself to just do one thing. I didn't have any plans for any more fantasy romance after Mythical Madness. I kind of sort of planned to stick with punk and sci-fi romance. So I guess we'll just see. The 19th Soul Sharper really doesn't have a planned romance, which is odd for me because normally it starts with a planned romance, but I'm sure it's in there someplace. It'll come up eventually.
That's kind of how I start, is I start with a couple. I start with the romance.
This one, well, like in the
everything
19th Soul Sherpa, it's Pole and then the guy who comes to kill him. And he attempts to kill him, at which point, you know, he does not kill him, and then he like basically bows and says, I'm your servant because you are the holy embodiment of our, basically Buddha, but it's not really Buddha because I don't know anything about Buddhism, but, you know, our God, our holy, you're our holy vessel or whatever. So, but there's no like female interest, so I don't know. There's no romance.
You've written male before, haven't you?
I have, but I don't get the vibe that this is a male. I mean, when I see you, or when I saw you, is male romance.
Right.
But
it'll come to you. Like we have this ongoing chat, the 4 of the podcasters, we have this ongoing chat on Facebook, and one day this week I just messaged everybody. I said, ooh, major plot point for book 3. I just figured it out. Because it just randomly came to me. So it'll come to you.
Yeah, it will. I mean, what I like to write on one project at a time too, so I try not to think ahead or like divide my focus between a lot of different things. So I just kind of let it be, you know what I mean, until I'm ready to work on it. Like I'm not going to sit here and stew over, oh, well, what am I going to do with this story? I don't want to do that because right now I want to focus on the story that I'm writing right now. I don't like to work on multiple projects at once. It divides my
right. Right, and this idea I can just write down and save for later when I get to writing book 3. But it was just like, oh, this helps continuity and
exactly
stuff.
What happened with me with Q's story when I was thinking about Aeon Project. I'm like, oh, like, oh, there it is. You know, like there's that. That's what happened. This is the, you know, this is the underlying story arc. Oh, well. Now I feel dumb because I should have known that from the start, but I didn't. So, so I just kind of jotted it down, like you said, you know, and it'll be there for when I get to that story. It's all you can do.
It's called discovery writing. It's all I do.
Yeah. Put our pants on one leg at a time.
Right? So we've actually been talking for quite a bit. So I think we should wrap it up unless you have anything dire you need to share.
No, ma'am. I'm done sharing for the day.
We do have our 1-year podiversary is coming up, and we are doing a giveaway. So you'll want to pay attention to our social media and listen to upcoming podcasts and get more information about that. It's going to be a huge giveaway. I've donated a paperback. I'm not really sure what the other. It's still being organized. But we're going to have a lot of literary prizes and swag. So pay attention to that. So. Thank you for joining us. If you like the podcast, please like, comment, and share. This has been episode number 39. Good night.
Good night, everybody.